As the nights grow colder and the holiday season creeps closer, some homes welcome cheerful decorations, while others invite something far darker. Tonight on Campfire Horror Tales, we uncover 6 true horror stories about elf-on-the-shelf encounters and living toys that should never have been brought inside. So get comfortable, dim the lights, and remember, some elves aren't watching to keep you safe. They're watching for something else. I never thought a simple holiday decoration could mess with my head. It started in late fall, when the days were getting shorter and the house felt a little too quiet. My parents stopped by one evening and brought me their old elf on the shelf. The same one we used to place around the house when I was a kid. Thought it might bring you some cheer, my dad said. My mom just smiled and set it on my kitchen counter. I laughed it off. I'm an adult now, living alone, working remotely. I don't exactly decorate for the holidays. But I didn't want to seem ungrateful. So I put the elf on the bookshelf in the living room and went back to my normal routine. At least, that's what I thought I did. The next evening, its head was turned slightly toward the front door. I didn't think much of it. Maybe I bumped the shelf. Maybe I set it down weird. But the next morning, it was facing the kitchen. I live alone. No pets. No one else comes in or out. Still, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe gravity, maybe vibration from walking around. Maybe I just didn't remember exactly how I left it. But then the movements became too deliberate to ignore. Every time I left a room and came back, the elf was just a little different. A tilt of the head, a shift in posture, a new angle of its painted eyes. Subtle enough that I kept questioning myself, but enough that I knew something was off. One night, as I worked late, I heard a faint sound from the hallway. A soft tap, 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 like plastic fingers brushing against the wall. I froze. It continued for a few seconds, then stopped completely. I checked, of course. Nothing. The elf was still on the shelf, but now it was leaning forward slightly, like it had been listening. The next day, I decided to test myself. And the elf. I placed it on the coffee table, right in the center, legs straight, head pointed forward. Then I set up my small home security camera aimed directly at it. I left for a walk. Just 20 minutes. When I came back, the elf was on the opposite end of the table, sitting upright, head tilted toward the hallway. My stomach dropped. I checked the camera footage immediately. The screen loaded. And there it was. At the 9-minute mark, the elf moved. Not fast. Not like a jump cut. It slowly slid across the table, inch by inch, like something small and deliberate was dragging itself toward the edge. Then it straightened its posture and turned its head toward the hallway, toward my bedroom door. I don't know how long I sat there staring at the footage. I deleted the video right after. I don't know why. Maybe because it didn't feel real. Maybe because I didn't want proof that something inexplicable was happening in my house. That night, I put the elf in a kitchen drawer and shut it tight. I even placed a heavy skillet on top of it. Felt ridiculous, but I needed to sleep. Around 2 a.m., a noise woke me. A soft creak, then another, then a faint, dragging sound on the floorboards right outside my room. I didn't move. I just listened, breath held. Something stopped directly in front of my closed bedroom door. I whispered to myself that it was just the house settling, just my imagination, just exhaustion after too many long work days. But then, the doorknob clicked. Not a twist, just a tiny metallic click, like someone small pressed their hand against it and applied pressure. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, I carefully walked to the kitchen. The drawer I had shoved the elf into was wide open. The skillet I placed on top was now on the counter. And the elf? It was sitting on the floor, right in front of my bedroom door, legs crossed neatly, head tilted up at me. Its painted smile somehow sharper than I remembered. I didn't even pack a bag. I grabbed my keys, walked out, and drove to my parents' house. When they asked why I showed up so early, I just said the apartment felt creepy. They laughed. They didn't push. The problem is, yesterday I stopped by the apartment just to grab some clothes. And the elf wasn't by the door. It wasn't on the table. It wasn't in the drawer. I found it on my bed, right in the center, facing the door, like it had been waiting. I signed up for the local December toy drive because I thought it would help me get out of my seasonal rut. Every year, once the cold settles in and the sky turns gray, I fall into the same quiet, heavy mood. Helping out kids in need seemed like a decent way to distract myself. The toy drive was run out of an old community center near the edge of town. The place always felt colder inside than outside. The radiators barely worked, the lights flickered, and the floors creaked like the building was annoyed we were even there. But the shelves were full of donated toys, and that part always made me smile. Until the day that box showed up. It was a plain cardboard box with no label and no return address. Usually donations came in bags, or with notes from families. This one looked wrong, like someone had folded the cardboard too tightly, crushing the edges, then taped it shut with uneven, overlapping strips. I opened it thinking I'd find a stuffed animal or some secondhand board game. Instead, there was a handmade elf doll, not cute, not cheerful, nothing like the commercial holiday stuff we usually got. The elf was stitched from coarse fabric, with small button eyes and a smile that looked like it had been sewn on in a hurry. The red felt of its hat was frayed, and one of its arms was slightly longer than the other. I remember saying out loud, "Yeah, no kid is getting this." I placed the elf on a table at the back of the room, next to the items we planned to sort through or toss later. That's when things started going missing. At first, it was small stuff, packs of crayons, a toy car, a set of markers. We assumed some volunteers misplaced them, but no one admitted to touching anything. Then the disappearance escalated. A brand new RC truck vanished overnight. A box of dolls disappeared from a locked closet. Bags of gifts we'd prepared for early delivery were found ripped open, their contents scattered across the floor. We set up a camera in the storage room just to keep track of what was happening. The next morning, when we checked the footage, something made my stomach twist. Around 3:30 a.m., the camera picked up movement. A small figure stepped into frame. It was the elf. The same handmade elf from the unlabeled box. At first, I thought maybe someone was pranking us. Maybe they moved it around when no one was looking. But the way it moved didn't look like someone posing it. It climbed down from the table, dragging itself on uneven legs. Its head jerked side to side as if scanning the room. Then it pushed over a box and rummaged through the toys, pulling things out one by one before walking off into the dark corner. The footage ended abruptly when the camera toppled over. We didn't say anything to the other volunteers. Who would believe us? Instead, we hid the elf in a metal supply cabinet and locked it with a padlock. I felt stupid, but I also felt relief, like this was finally over. The next day, I came in early. The cabinet was open. Not broken, just open. The lock was on the floor, and the elf was gone. I called the coordinator, told her we should cancel for the day. She brushed it off, said maybe someone misplaced the doll. But when we started sorting toys again, people kept complaining about the feeling of being watched. A few volunteers left early, saying the building felt off. That evening, I stayed behind to double-check inventory. The center was silent except for the hum of the vending machine and the occasional creak from the ceiling. I was counting stuffed animals when I heard a soft tapping. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the hallway. When I stepped out, something small darted behind a stack of donation boxes. I froze, heart pounding. The tapping continued, closer this time, until it stopped right behind me. I turned slowly. Nothing there. But on the floor, at my feet, was a single button, one of the elf's eyes. I grabbed my things and left without finishing the count. The next morning, I found the elf sitting in the passenger seat of my car. Its missing eye had been stitched back on, with bright red thread, and its head was turned toward me, like it had been waiting all night. I didn't go back to the toy drive after that. But sometimes, when I walk to my car in the early morning, I hear that same tapping in the distance. Slow, deliberate, like something small is trying to keep pace with me. When I rented this house, I knew it came with quirks. The listing said it was older but full of charm, which usually means drafty windows, uneven floors, and appliances older than I am. Still, the price was good, and I needed somewhere quiet for the fall and early winter. I didn't even know the place had an attic until my second week living there. I pulled a long string near the hallway closet, and a narrow staircase unfolded with a loud, tired groan. Cool air drifted down, carrying that dry, dusty smell old houses always seem to collect. I climbed up mostly out of curiosity. The attic was cluttered with boxes left by previous tenants. Most were empty, some filled with random junk, old lights, bent ornaments, tangled tinsel. But one box caught my attention. A plain white container, sealed with yellowed tape, sitting alone in the far corner. It wasn't labeled. It didn't belong to me. But something about it pulled my eyes toward it anyway. Inside was a single decoration. An elf on the shelf, the classic type. Big smile, bright eyes, red felt suit. Except this one looked older. The fabric was duller, its smile slightly crooked, and its legs were bent in a way that didn't look intentional. I didn't want it in my house. But I also didn't want to toss someone else's belongings. So I set the elf back inside the box, closed it, and pushed it to the corner again. That should have been the end of it. The next morning, I walked through the hallway and froze. The attic ladder was open. I never opened it after closing it the day before. I climbed up again, feeling stupid but uneasy. The white box was still in the corner, but the lid was slightly off, not completely sealed. I swore I had taped it back shut. I put the lid on firmly, pressed the tape, and went back down. That night, around 1 a.m., I heard a faint scraping sound coming from above my bedroom. Attic floorboards, slow, dragging steps. I told myself animals get into attics all the time, probably a squirrel or raccoon. But the sound didn't match the frantic scampering of an animal. It was steady, measured, almost like someone pacing. The next day, the box was open again. And this time, the elf wasn't inside. My stomach dropped. I scanned the attic carefully, heart pounding in my ears. No elf. No sign of where it went. I crouched, looked under old furniture, behind boxes. Nothing. Back downstairs, I kept trying to convince myself I had misplaced it. That maybe it fell out when I carried things around. Maybe I kicked it somewhere without noticing. Then I saw it, sitting on the end of my hallway table, hands neatly in its lap, head tilted toward my bedroom door. I didn't scream, but something inside me recoiled. I picked the elf up between two fingers and shoved it back into the attic box, this time taping it shut with 3 layers of fresh tape. Then I stacked 2 heavy boxes on top of it for good measure. That night, I barely slept. Every creak made my pulse spike. At around 3 a.m., the pacing started again, this time faster. Short steps, sharp turns, like something was irritated or excited. Then came a sound I will never forget. A low, breathy giggle. Childlike, soft, and far too close. I sat up in bed, every muscle tight. The giggle came again, directly above me. I waited until dawn before going back into the attic. Sunlight helped, but not much. The boxes I had stacked were knocked over. The tape on the white box was shredded. And the elf? Gone again. I found it later that night. I was brushing my teeth when I noticed the bathroom door wasn't closing properly. Something was blocking it. When I looked down, I saw the elf sitting right behind it, legs stretched out, head tilted all the way back so it was staring up at me upside down. I stumbled backwards so fast I nearly slipped. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to. I locked myself in my room and stayed there until morning. I decided to move out immediately. Didn't care about breaking the lease. Didn't care about losing money. I packed a few things and left the rest behind. Yesterday, the landlord emailed me asking if I had meant to leave a holiday decoration behind. He attached a photo. It was the elf, sitting on the living room floor of the now empty house, facing the front door. Like it knew I'd come back for my belongings. Like it was waiting. I'm not going back. My uncle used to tell me a story he swore was true, one he refused to repeat once the holidays came around. He said winter decorations weren't fun for him anymore, not after what happened in his 20s. And the older I got, the more I noticed he never kept any holiday decor in his house. No lights, no wreath, not even a simple ornament. He told me it all started with an old elf on the shelf he found while unpacking boxes after moving into his first apartment. He had no idea where it came from. It wasn't his, and it wasn't something his parents would have owned. It was shoved inside a box of kitchen supplies, legs bent awkwardly, its red felt faded almost pink. He didn't throw it away right away. He said he felt guilty tossing someone else's belongings. So he put the elf on a high bookshelf, just for now. At the time, he thought nothing of it, until it moved. The first time, he assumed he had bumped the shelf and knocked it down. It was lying on the floor in the living room one morning, face down like it had fallen. He placed it back on the shelf and went on with his day. But the next time was different. He came home from work and found it sitting on the couch, legs stretched forward, head tilted toward the hallway. His apartment was locked. No one else had a key. And he knew, absolutely knew, he hadn't put it there. That night, he put the elf inside a kitchen drawer and slammed it shut. He told me he woke up around 2 a.m. to a small, rhythmic tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. Not loud, but sharp enough to cut through the silence. It took him a minute to realize it was coming from the kitchen. He walked in slowly, turning on lights one by one. The tapping stopped right as he stepped inside. When he opened the drawer, the elf was inside. But the drawer was pulled halfway open, like something had been trying to climb out. He threw it in the trash after that. Didn't hesitate, didn't overthink. He carried the bag outside to the dumpster and made sure it landed deep inside. He said he felt better instantly, like he'd finally taken back control of his home. But the next evening, when he got home, the elf was sitting on his front porch. Not in the dumpster. Not inside the trash bag. Just sitting there. Its felt suit coated in dust, its smile a little more crooked, its button eyes dull like they had been scratched. My uncle said he froze for a full minute before grabbing it with gloves and tossing it into a storage closet inside the building. He didn't want to risk touching it again. That night, the tapping returned. Louder this time, angrier. Tap, tap, tap. Then it stopped, followed by silence. He tried to sleep. He really did. But early in the morning, he heard something else. The faint but unmistakable sound of footsteps in his living room. Small ones. Soft. Fast. He didn't leave his bedroom until the sun came up. When he finally opened the living room door, he saw holiday decorations scattered across the floor. The ornaments he never hung. The string lights he never plugged in. They were strewn everywhere, like someone had sifted through them, searching. And at the center of the mess was the elf, sitting upright, facing the hallway, waiting. He didn't pack. He ran, grabbed his wallet, phone, keys, and bolted straight out of the apartment. He stayed with a friend for 3 nights before returning with a maintenance worker to clean the place out. The worker found the elf inside the hall closet. When he reached for it, my uncle shouted at him to stop. He said he couldn't explain why. It was just instinct. The maintenance guy laughed, but stepped back, saying, "Man, it's just a toy." My uncle didn't take anything from that apartment except his documents. He moved out the same day, paid the penalty fee, and never looked back. He told me that story only once. Years later, when I asked him about it again, he just shook his head and said, "Don't bring an elf into your home. Not the old ones. Not the ones you don't recognize. Sometimes things get attached to them." And then he said something that still sits with me. That thing didn't want me gone. It wanted me to stay. Forever. One afternoon, about a year after the disappearance, she asked me to help her move some boxes from her garage. While we worked, she suddenly said, "There's something I need to tell someone before I die. Someone who won't call me crazy." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. And she told me about the elf. Her grandson, Tyler, loved his elf on the shelf, a bright, almost new one his mom bought the year before he vanished. He named it Jingles and carried it around even though it wasn't meant to be played with. When Tyler disappeared, the police asked about everything he owned, including the elf. His mom said she hadn't seen it for weeks. But Mrs. Landry found it. Not at first, and not in any place that made sense. She said the elf showed up 3 days after Tyler went missing, sitting on the windowsill in the kitchen. She assumed one of the officers had found it and placed it there. But when she asked them, they all said no. She moved it to his room and closed the door. But the next morning, it was back in the kitchen. Same position, same tilted head, hands folded. She put it in a drawer. The next day, it was on the living room couch. She hid it in a storage bin in the garage. 2 days later, she found it sitting on her nightstand. By this point, she was too scared to mention it. She didn't want the police thinking she was unstable. And deep down, she hoped it meant something. That maybe Tyler was trying to communicate through the toy he loved most. But the worst part, she said, was the voice. It started as faint noises late at night, little creaks, like someone stepping lightly in the hallway. Then whispers, soft, muffled, impossible to understand. One night, she woke to a quiet sound coming from the living room. A tiny voice, high-pitched but shaky, like a child trying to speak through tears. Mom. She froze in her bed. She said the voice didn't sound exactly like Tyler, but close enough that her heart ached. She followed the sound into the living room, each step heavy. The voice called again. Mom, I'm here. But the room was empty, except for the elf. It was sitting upright on the couch, head turned toward the hallway. And its mouth, normally painted in a fixed smile, looked stretched, like the fabric had pulled tight around it. She ran back to bed and didn't get up until sunrise. The next morning, she tried to get rid of the elf for good. She placed it in a trash bag, tied it tight, and drove 20 minutes to a dumpster behind a grocery store. She tossed it in, hands shaking. When she got home, she felt lighter, relieved, free of it. Until that night, a soft thump came from the front porch. Then another. Then something scraped across the door, like tiny plastic fingers dragging along the wood. She opened the door only after it stopped. There was the elf, sitting right at the edge of the welcome mat. Face turned upward like it had been waiting for her to look down. She didn't touch it. She used a broom to push it inside a shoebox and locked it in the attic. She never went back to check if it was still in there. Some things, she told me, carry pieces of the people who love them, and some pieces shouldn't come back. She never outright said she believed Tyler was gone, but she also never expressed hope that he'd return. Before I left that day, she took my hand and squeezed it. If you ever hear a child's voice in the night, she whispered, don't answer it. Not unless you're sure it's alive. I asked her what happened to the elf in the attic. She looked at me with a hollow expression and said, it hasn't made noise in a long time, but that doesn't mean it stopped listening. My grandmother was one of the toughest people I knew, the kind who never jumped at loud noises, never watched horror movies because she said, real life is scary enough, and never let anything or anyone push her around. That's why it shocked me when I realized there was one thing she truly feared. An elf. A small, old-fashioned elf on the shelf she kept sealed in a taped-up box at the top of her closet. I didn't know about it until I was 13. I was helping her look for photo albums when I noticed the box, duct tape wrapped around it like she was trying to keep something from getting out. It wasn't labeled. It wasn't dusty like the other boxes. It looked maintained. When I reached for it, she snapped, "Don't touch that." Her voice was sharp, harsher than I'd ever heard. I backed away immediately. She breathed hard for a moment, then said, "That elf is not meant to be out. Ever." Years passed before she finally told me the story. She said when she was a teenager, her family didn't have much money, so most decorations were reused year after year. One winter, her father brought home a small elf doll he'd found at a flea market. It wasn't the cheerful kind we see now. Its features were hand-stitched, its smile too wide, and its eyes painted in a way that made them look like they were following you. She hated it instantly. Her mother placed it on a shelf in the living room anyway. "It's harmless," she had said. "Just decoration." But strange things started happening within days. Every night, her mother would set the elf on the same spot. Every morning, it would be somewhere else, closer to the hallway, near the stairs, once sitting directly outside her bedroom door. Her parents insisted she was imagining it. Or maybe her siblings were messing with her. But she swore they weren't. And then things escalated. She'd hear small footsteps late at night, quiet, soft taps across the wooden floor. Whenever she got up to check, the house fell silent. But as soon as she returned to her room, the footsteps started again, closer each time. One night, she woke up to a faint giggle, a childlike sound, wrong in a way she could never describe. When she looked toward her bedroom door, she saw a small shadow pass under it. She screamed for her parents. They didn't believe her. The next morning, the elf was sitting on her pillow. That was the day her father decided to get rid of it. He wrapped it in newspaper, put it in a box, and threw it in the fireplace. My grandma told me she watched the flames rise higher than usual, crackling like something inside the box was resisting. The fire died down. The elf was gone. Or so they thought. 2 days later, they found the elf back on the living room shelf, not burned, not damaged, looking exactly the same as before. Her father didn't try to throw it away again. He put it in a shoebox, taped it shut with layer after layer of duct tape, and shoved it into the closet. "If it wants to be here," he said, "at least it'll stay put." My grandmother said the house became quiet after that. No more footsteps, no more giggling. But she refused to open that box ever again. When her parents passed and she inherited the house, the box stayed exactly where it was. And when she moved years later, she took it with her, sealed shut. "That elf has been with me longer than anyone else," she told me, voice low. "It doesn't want to leave, and I won't be the one to let it out." When she got older, she made me promise something. "If anything happens to me, don't open that box. Don't move it. Don't take it with you. Just leave it behind." She passed away last year. I went to her house to help clean up, sorting through her closets. I reached the top shelf and saw the box. Still taped, still tight, still exactly where she always kept it. For a moment, I thought about opening it. I thought about proving to myself it was all just a story she told a scared kid. But my hands wouldn't move. My chest tightened. And then I heard something. A faint sound from inside the box. Too soft to be breathing. Too light to be shifting. Just a slow, rhythmic tap from within. I left the house without looking back. And the box stayed where it was. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear that tapping. Like something tiny remembers me. Like it's waiting